What up, fam? Welcome to Skill Tree, where we learn how to do just about everything. Now, I know what you're thinking. Clever, why are you dressed up like a sexy pirate? Please. No, it's because I'm after that booty. But also, I am wearing this because I made this. I made this whole thing. Before we get into my whole little spiel here, though, I need you to do me a favor. A lot of us have like a relative, maybe it's like a grandparent or an aunt or something, who like to like hand make us clothes for holidays or birthdays or whatever. And I feel like a lot of us kind of roll our eyes and are like, oh, thanks, and appreciate it, but kind of put it in the bottom of our drawer. Here's what I need you to do. Pause this right now, call them up, tell them you love them. Do it now. I didn't know until I tried this what a threaded hellscape they went through to make these things. Seriously, like this was a lot of fun to do. I made this and I'm very, very proud of it. But hot damn was it hard to do. And I don't mean that to discourage anybody. It was very rewarding on the other end of it, and a big part of why it's difficult for me is I have a very tight schedule because I want to shoot these and send them to you. So yeah, I was under different kind of constraints. Without those though, it really kind of would have been an enjoyable journey, but there is a lot to learn even at the basic level. So seriously, crazy props to you seamstresses and seamsters. Is that correct? I don't know if that's correct. You got skills. You got crazy skills. It is hot, so before we continue, I'm gonna take this off. All right, so let me back up a little bit and say that originally this skill was how to make this. And in a way, it still is, kind of in a roundabout way. So since we're starting this thing at such a low skill level here, I decided I was gonna use one of those patterns that you can get from the store. This guy, as a matter of fact, Butterick4486. I figured pre-made pattern, everything was laid out for you already. How hard could it be? Again, I'm not trying to scare you away from trying this skill because you absolutely should. It is so cool to be able to do. It really is cool. But do not go into it like I did, super cocky, being like, whatever, just sewing, I already have the pattern, no big deal. There is a whole language surrounding this. You open up the pattern, there's friggin' hieroglyphics on it, and there's a lot more to learn at this basic level than just kind of how to sew the seams. So that's what this episode is gonna be about. I am gonna teach you how to read these things on a very, very basic level, from what I can understand at least, and how I learned in general to lay these things out and what everything on them kind of means. Kind of a teach a man to fish mentality, where I could show you how I just put this together. I don't know if you'd be able to duplicate it from the 50-something steps that it takes. Or I could show you how to read one of these. You can pick one up and just follow the steps yourself, and that's way easier. So all right, I feel like our expectations have been laid out here, so let's get to it and level up this skill. To the store. Now to get this party started, I first went to my local fabric store and found my way to their table of pattern catalogs. Fabric stores and craft stores often have this. It's just kind of a table laid out with all these books of patterns. You just kind of flip through them and you find one you like. So for example, I really liked these pants here. So I found the pattern number on the catalog and then made my way over to their bank of file cabinets. These drawers have the brand of the catalog and the range of numbers for the patterns that it holds. So for example, that pants one is by Simplicity, so I'd go to the Simplicity drawer, and then the number for it is 4059, so I just looked up 4059 and there it was. By the way, to kind of drive home how cocky I was like, oh, I like this one's shirt and I like this one's pants. I'll just get both of these, I'll whip them both up and we'll have an incredible costume. In a weekend. Nope. I'll have you know I am filming this Thursday night, the Friday before I put it out, which means I have to edit all night. I finished this yesterday night at 1 a.m. after having started it on Saturday. No hubris, you've done it again. Now, while you're in the store, the real important bit is on the back of this thing. Back here, it shows you the kind of fabric you need, how much of it you need, notions. Notions, by the way, I found out are like the buttons and zippers and all that kind of stuff. Those are notions. And it says right on the back of these things what notions you'd need to finish this up. It also has a bunch of sketches to tell you how these things are gonna look, which was super helpful as well. So with this guidance, I started wandering through the forests of fabric, just looking for that perfect material to make me feel alive and like a sexy pirate. All right, but from here, we have our fabrics and we have our patterns, we have everything we need, so let's move on to navigating the pattern. So I figured I would start with the shirt because, you know, I'll just bust that out anyways, no problem. Inside the little envelope, you're gonna find your tissue paper patterns as well as some little booklets of directions. And the booklet of directions is both really helpful and really infuriating, and I'll cover more on that in a little bit. But it does have a really helpful glossary of terms that you're gonna be using throughout the project, as well as directions for how to lay out your cuts on the fabric, and of course, the general assembly for the entire piece. So the directions, they're not bad, they just assume a level of experience that if you're just kind of going into this completely green, you're not gonna have. As such, it very much relies on you both reading the text and seeing and understanding the markings on the picture. Everything isn't described to you in the text. You have to also look at the picture and glean information from that as well. I did not know this, and it led to hours of frustration for me. Let me try to stop that from happening to you. All right, lots to cover, so let's go ahead and start at the beginning at the template setup. First things first, after you've carefully opened them all up and laid them out, you should press them with an iron. And it didn't tell me to do that in the directions. I watched a bunch of videos that research everything that says to do that first, and I can see why. It absolutely helps lay everything flat, and you don't want your template to be like creased and up a little bit, because then all the sides are gonna drag in that amount and you're not gonna get the right measurements all along. Okay, so if we turn over to the directions here, you're gonna see it has a sizing chart. All you have to do is look at the different measurements on there and see what sizes fit you, so you kind of know if you're like a small, a medium, or a large. Now this pattern did have those 3 sizes in it, small, medium, and large. So to accommodate all those different sizes, they actually have different styles of line to tell you which one you're working off of. So in this pattern's case, the solid line equals the largest size, the long dash line equaled a medium, and the short dashes equal a small. So just look all along the pattern and familiarize yourself with these lines and where they go so you don't cut into the wrong lines by mistake. And while we're here, let's go over some of the other little markings that you're gonna find on the template as well. First, you're gonna see a lot of these little triangle guys along the outside lines. These are called notches, and they're used to line pieces up. Basically, you put a little notch in the fabric, and where the 2 pieces meet, you can line up those notches so you're sure that everything is lining up correctly. You're also gonna see a lot of little like triangles and dots on there. All of them are used for like lining up purposes or to tell you like to stop sewing or stop cutting at a certain area. And the directions reference them directly. They're like, sew until you reach the small circle mark. Another super important marking is this grain line. So fabrics actually have like a grain, a direction everything is kind of traveling. There's gonna be some occasions, like if you're using pattern fabrics or like a fur or something, it's gonna be really in your face when you've put the grains in the wrong directions. You know, if you've got like a fabric with birds flying in this direction, and then you sew something and they're kind of going off cockeyed like this, you're gonna tell that it's wrong, right? And it can also mess with like the way the fabric stretches and how it reacts with itself. So you just wanna make sure that that grain line is followed, and we're gonna go over exactly what that means on the fabric a little later on. All right, next up is this fold line here. This shows where the pattern has to line up with a fold before you cut it. So we've done a bunch of times on this channel where we're making a leather pattern, and rather than draw out the whole thing, we'll draw only 1/2 of it, fold it, and then we cut it, and then it comes out perfectly symmetrical. These patterns work the same way. They're only half of what you need for whatever side you're doing, and then you put it on a folded piece of fabric, and then when you cut it out, you have the whole thing mirrored perfectly. That fold line tells you exactly where to line up the fold of the fabric. I know that seemed like a lot, but the directions really lay it out well. As a matter of fact, talking about the fold of the fabric, there are these little diagrams in the direction that show you how to fold the fabric to get the most out of it, and also to make sure everything is following the correct grain lines. Now, on those diagrams, you're either gonna see like an F or an S, or something that actually says out fold and selvage. Now, the fold, like we talked about, is just the fold in the fabric. It's that crease that's formed once you fold the fabric. The selvage, though, is the uncut kind of finished edge as it comes off the bolt. And with those diagrams, it becomes really easy to just kind of lay everything out and see how it should all be situated. Okay, there are a few other just really important things to take note of while you're looking at this document. One is gonna be the seam allowance. Now, you don't wanna sew like right up against your cut edge, right? Because that thread's gonna pull loose and it's gonna get all janky or whatever. So the amount of space away from that edge is what your seam allowance is. Now on mine, it says 5/8, so I have a 5/8 seam allowance. Once you know what it is, it's actually really easy to figure out on your sewing machine because there's usually little lines on the right side of the needle that are like 1/8 apart. So you just figure out where your 5/8 line is and you just stick to that line. And this last little bit of information, I found this unreadable without really paying attention to this one part. And that is specifically this chart right here that shows the different colors for the right side and the wrong side of the fabric and the pattern. The right side being the side you'll see when you're actually wearing the thing, and the wrong side being the inside, the sides that you don't see. And that's one of those times where this doesn't tell you a thing, you have to look at the picture to see. So like, look at steps 4 and 5 right here. One is saying to stitch the shoulder edges of the back between notches and triangles, and the other one is saying pin the back to the front at the shoulders to adjust the ease, base stitch, and all that. Never once does it say turn it inside out or make sure the right side is facing out or anything like that. You have to look at the pictures and know what you're seeing in order to do this right. I did not do that right. I didn't pay attention to it at first, and I was so lost. Do as I say, not as I do, read the directions. All right, I know that was a lot of like overarching information to throw at you, but knowing how to read those directions is gonna make all the rest of it so much easier. But now that we have that all set, we can finally get cutting. With that general understanding, I'm finally comfortable enough to start cutting out my pattern. Remember though, stick to the correct dotted line or solid line or whatever you need for the size that you're going for. Fortunately though, I actually didn't have to cut out all of the patterns that were on the sheet. Again, if you look at this little kit, it actually offers 4 variations on this same shirt pattern. I opted for A here because I didn't really need all those frills and foppishness. So with that in mind, the directions say that I only need patterns 1, 2, 3, 5, 7, and 8, which I dutifully cut out and lined up in a nice row for use. All the ones I didn't use, I folded up nicely and put them back inside their little envelope in case I want to use them in the future. In fact, at the end of this project, I did that to all of them. So those patterns are actually pretty resilient, and I think I could make a lot of different shirts out of them, or a lot of the same shirt out of them. Now it's time to bust out my fabric. Look at me. Look at how happy I am with that fabric. Shouldn't be happy, because it wasn't enough. It wasn't enough fabric. Here's another bunch of crap Clever didn't know. On the back of this thing where it says how much fabric to pick up, there are 2 different measurements. One says 45 on here and one says 60. Numbers that I ignored, like a asshole. What those are is the width of the bolt of fabric that you're getting. So it's either 45 inches or 60 inches. And obviously if you have the 60-inch one, you need to buy less yardage of fabric because you have that extra, in the width. My fabric turned out to be like a weird in-between size. It was like 53 inches for some reason, and I did not have enough, so pay attention to that measurement. But after grabbing another bit of fabric, I laid it out as shown in the diagram. Then it was time to bust out my trusty iron. Now you want this fabric to be nice and flat before you put your patterns on it, for the same reason that you wanted your pattern to be flat. It's hard to get exact measurements on something that's all warped and wrinkled and messed up. You're going to want to pay special attention to that folded edge too, because remember, we're going to be lining our pattern up with that folded edge. So that needs to be crisp and straight. And I learned in general when sewing, whenever you have a seam, always press it. It's going to make everything match up perfectly, sew evenly, and make everything really clean. So yeah, press your seams whenever you do it. Once we have everything flat and looking nice, we can go ahead and start placing our patterns just like it shows on the diagram. Now notice the diagram shows that one of those patterns is positioned with the right side facing up and one with the wrong side facing up. Again, nowhere does it say it on there, you just have to pay attention to the coloration on the pieces. But with that in mind, I placed the patterns into position, matching that fold line that we talked about onto the fold of the fabric. Then I started to pin everything into place. Make sure you're sending your pin through the pattern and all of the layers of fabric as well. Also, I learned to keep your pins kind of further in from the edge so you don't have to fight with them when you're cutting them with your scissors. And once everything's pinned into place, you go ahead and start cutting them out with your scissors. Just go nice and slow with this part, making sure you stay as close to that line as possible without cutting into it. Okay, so remember those notches we talked about? Everywhere you see one of those along the edge, go ahead and make a little snip in your fabric. This is going to be well within our seam allowance, so you don't have to worry that anybody's going to see it. Now also, as we talked about, there's all those other little marks that are on there, tiny little circles and triangles and junk. You're going to want to make sure you mark your fabric where all of these go too, because they're all referenced in the directions. To make sure it's exactly in place on both pieces of fabric, I went ahead and stuck a pin through the mark and through both pieces. Then I just used some tailor's chalk and made a mark where the pin went through. By doing this, I'm sure they're in exactly the same place on both pieces of fabric. And as you can see, when I'm done, this piece opens up to be a perfectly symmetrical back piece. This piece here, as a matter of fact. Now, in the second piece of fabric that I picked up, I laid down the rest of the template pieces that I had to cut out. All of it's the same. I mostly bring this up because these pieces show that grain line. So you want to go ahead and make sure that arrow is facing in the same direction of the grain of the fabric. The easy way to know what direction that is to follow the selvage. That line of the selvage is also the same direction the grain of the fabric is going. And as you can see by this piece kind of on the diagonal, not all of the pieces are going to line up the way you think they should on the fabric. So again, really pay attention to all those symbols and where they're going. Now on these pieces, the fabric was also doubled up, but because it wasn't cut along that folded edge, it ended up being two identical pieces rather than one big symmetrical piece. And these just end up being for like the cuffs of the shirt and the lapels here. Oh, and just an FYI, this is the mark for a buttonhole. That's all. I just want to mention that's a buttonhole. I didn't know what it was, so there you have it. Speaking of things I didn't know about, this pattern called for interfacing. Interfacing, it turns out, is a textile that gives structure to fabric. So for example, this cuff here has some rigidity and maintains its shape because there's interfacing inside. Without that, it would just be kind of floppy like the rest of the material. I guess there are a few different kinds of interfacing, ones you'd kind of sew into place or knit into place. But the one I picked up has an adhesive backing that is activated with heat. So I just use the patterns of the pieces that require interfacing to cut out the shapes. Then I put the adhesive side of the interfacing against the wrong side of the fabric and ironed it on. The iron melts the adhesive and the adhesive sticks to the fabric. I thought that was pretty cool. Like, it instantly added a lot of body to the piece and kind of had that feeling like I associate with like a good stiff collar or cuffs. And now I know why those things are how they are. You learn here on Skilled Trade. Okay, so from there, all of our pieces are cut and ready to be put together. All you have to do at this point is follow the directions, which I say like it's a walk in the park. It's not, but again, it's not like discouragingly impossible, especially with the internet. So for example, these lapels here, the directions for how to put these together are atrocious. I can't make heads nor tails looking at this, how it was supposed to go together. I was absolutely lost. So I did what any self-respecting millennial will do, and I took to the internet. And within 10 minutes, I found an example of exactly what it was supposed to look like. And this was kind of all I needed to be like, I see what this is trying to tell me. And then look at how it turned out. Like, that looks awesome. That looks super professional. So in putting this thing together, there were moments where it's like, oh, hey, it's starting to look like a shirt or whatever. But things like that looks awesome. I'm sorry, I'm very, very proud of that. That's really cool. All that to say, don't get discouraged if you're going through this and you see something you can't figure out. The world is full of like people who will put this stuff on the internet and help you out and help you figure it out. I suppose if you guys are interested, I have the footage from every step. I could put that together. I warn you, it's like 60 steps to put this together, and the vast majority of it is me folding fabric and running it through a sewing machine. It's not thrilling watch. But my hope is that by learning just kind of the basics of the pattern, it takes away that initial kind of scariness like that I had when I opened the thing up. It makes you ready to dive into it because it really is a fun skill to learn. But check this shirt out though, I made this shirt. And I don't give a hot damn, this came out really good, and as difficult and daunting as it was at first, the payoff is so high, totally worth it. And now I'm comfortable doing this where I'm ready to tackle another pattern. I genuinely like this skill, this is a lot of fun. Which is a shame though, because I'm promptly gonna ruin this thing. This is for my corrupted druid costume, and this is his pre-corruption shirt. It's gonna have a bad time pretty soon. But yeah, if you have a sewing machine, I definitely encourage you to go out, pick up like an easy version of these patterns here and just give it a go. I really liked it. If you really liked what you saw here, then why don't you give me that thumbs up love, and don't forget to subscribe so you know when I release new content. Now let me just take a minute to shout out my awesome patrons. So we just opened our $15 Patreon tier, the Golden Gorillas, and so many of you either migrated from the $10 tier or just were new and jumped right into that $15 tier. It is almost overwhelming to me that you guys support us like that. I make videos of things that I think are really cool, and the fact that you enjoy what I do here enough to support, it honestly means the world to me. It really does. Speaking of which, let me shout out my newest patrons, all $15 tier by the way. Jason Chapman, Silver Griffin, and Crystal Chase. You rock. You rock. That's so cool. Thank you so much for jumping in and joining the fam in that way. By the end of this month, I'm going to be all done with the website, so there's a bunch of free stuff that's going to be coming for your tier. Patterns, art, yeah, whatever I can do to show my appreciation. I really am thankful. Thank you so much. If you'd like to support the show, check out my Patreon link down in the description below. Finally, if there's any skills you'd like to see me cover, leave it in the comments section and I will add it to the list. All right, I better get going. I think I am ready to tackle some pants, because my druid don't get down like that. He should have pants while he's adventuring. In the meantime, keep leveling up, you.